Welcome to Fantasy Football Live, presented by Ram Trucks. It's week 10. The chaos is back. Everything that I hate is right back in front of us. Bye weeks, early morning international games that stink. Your fantasy roster better already be set because things are already getting chaotic. But we're going to answer every question we can over the course of the next hour. Andy Behrens, Matt Harmon, Tera Roberts. We are going to be here getting you set, getting you ready. Things are getting complicated. I don't know. It feels like maybe this is we got a lot to break down, not the least of which is one Christian McCaffrey. But I don't know. Andy Behrens, does it feel like things are finally normalizing? Is this getting any easier this season?
It never feels totally normal when you're just sitting around watching Daniel Jones play football. So it's not the most normal morning, but yeah, getting Christian McCaffrey back certainly helps. It would be better if the number 2 overall pick, Tyreek Hill, could also play today.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that. We got plenty to get to there. By the way, the Giants are in the red zone right now. There is a game going on. The Giants are taking on the Carolina Panthers in the game that America didn't want. We sent that straight over to Germany instead. 17-7 is the score in that, as you can see right there. Chuba Hubbard with 138 rushing yards. Tyrone Tracy, who Matt Harmon told you last week is squarely the number 1 back there for better or for worse, 85 rushing yards and a touchdown. Harmon, you got up early and had your coffee and was just excited for this matchup, right?
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, number one, it's not that early on the East Coast. Let's give it a rest. You know, I was able to get the breakfast in, get the cold plunge in, get the walk in before this game, and then plopped right down on the couch to watch some very interesting, young players for the Carolina Panthers, for some interesting young players for the Giants. Tyrone Tracy ripping off that big run. And, hey, the Daniel Jones rushing overs also hit in this game. So I'm good, man. I'm happy with Germany football.
By the way, you're going to have to fill me in on the cold plunge. I already got the workout, the lift, and the hot tub, but I didn't get the cold plunge. So he's playing chess while I'm playing checkers. Tera Roberts, can you share any of this excitement? Like, I feel like Harmon just sold us a bill of goods like the Music Man on this game. Are we feeling wild and frisky over Panthers and Giants this morning?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm feeling as good as him. My morning was not as effective, but the running backs are pulling through in a fantastic way. So from a fantasy perspective, yeah, it's a great morning. Minus the cold plunge.
Well, minus the cold plunge. Yeah, we just got a touchdown in this game. Daniel Jones with a running touchdown, 2-yard touchdowns. So now we have 17-13. We're waiting on the extra point for the Giants. We will keep you updated on the juggernaut of that matchup because I know it's impacting everybody's fantasy football. Let's be clear. I mean, obviously guys are playing, and that means everybody's paying attention. You can also pay attention on social media. Dalton Del Don is celebrating CMC's return. He's taking social media questions over on Twitter X right now. And we're going to take a bunch of questions here. You can get us in the YouTube chat. You know that we love that. You know that I'm going to get to these questions, and we're going to get to as much chaos as we possibly can. Let's get now to the actives and inactives that we've got hanging out for us. First and foremost, Christian McCaffrey, active. We'll get to that in a moment. Calm down. Trevor Lawrence, inactive. Chris Olave on injured reserve. Amari Cooper is now officially inactive for today's game. That's a big one. We've also got some Monday action here to keep an eye on. Nico Collins is going to be a game-time decision for the Texans. Tank Dell is expected to play. And then Tyreek Hill will be a game-time decision. So let's start a little bit here. What do you do when you've got Monday night game-time decision, Andy Behrens, on guys like Tyreek Hill, who's in all of my leagues, and Nico Collins? What are you supposed to do with that for Sunday?
Yeah, it's really tricky because they're both so good that you have to hold out hope for them, right? This is not a level of player where you can say, oh, well, I'll just slide in, Jacoby Myers and take those points. No, you want to hold out hope that you actually get production from like a top 5 real life receiver. First thing you do is you got to put them in a flex spot, right? Give yourself the maximum number of alternatives if you have to pivot away from them. The trouble is there's not, there's no player like either one of those two on those rosters, right? Like you can pivot to Bob Woods if you have to with the Texans. You can pivot to, I don't know, Tutu Atwell or Jonnu Smith or Odell Beckham in that Rams-Dolphins game, but nobody's going to give you the production that you would hope for from Tyreek Hill. So really, you've just got to put him in flex spots and hope that your stars actually play.
There's a question on YouTube already. I will ask Tera then. If you had the choice between Tyreek Hill or Deebo Samuel, who are you playing?
Yeah, I'm playing Deebo Samuel. I'm not weighing that risk there. It seems like Deebo is, closer to being a little bit more confident of a pick there. So good matchup. I would lean towards Deebo on that one.
Yeah, I think if you got Tyreek in and he doesn't play, you just grab one big ice cube because that's what you do when you pour the whiskey in, and then you just sit back and realize it's not your week. All right, let's get to the top fantasy storylines for Week 10. Andy Behrens, we'll stick with you on this one. Your top fantasy storyline is...
Oh, yeah, it's got to be Christian McCaffrey's usage this week. It's the biggest open question right now because, A, his head coach absolutely cannot be trusted to tell us the truth, so we need to see it. And B, Jordan Mason has been much too good to drop in fantasy, assuming he's still going to have a rotational role in this offense. McCaffrey, of course, is an easy start this week in fantasy because he was your #1 overall pick and you have been waiting 10 weeks. Also, he's a legendary multi-purpose running back. My guess is that he debuts with a double-digit workload, but perhaps not at 80% of the snaps in last year's usage. We're seeing some reports now that he might get full usage right away. That to me is just shocking, in part because Mason is averaging 5.1 yards per carry, well over 3 yards after contact. He's among the leaders so far this season in missed tackles. He's stylistically so different from McCaffrey. They're excellent complementary players. This team doesn't need to immediately grind McCaffrey into dust, but also they're 4-4, right? They don't have the luxury of patience necessarily. Ideally, they can slowly ramp up McCaffrey to 16, 18 touches per game, a level at which he's a top 5 running back each week, no question about it. I don't actually have him in my top 10 this week, basically because of short-term workload concerns, but rank doesn't really matter with McCaffrey, of course, because you're playing him whenever he's active.
Well, one of the questions that's coming on the chat from Adam says, ask FFL, love the show. See, that's how you get in. You just tell us you love us. I need help in my flex in a half PPR. Jonnu, Bigsby, Demario, or Mason. What would you do, Andy?
Who were my names again? They were Jonnu, Bigsby,
Demario, or Mason.
Oh man, I really want to play Mason, and I think he still has a role. So that's given the alternatives here. If it's a full PPR, I might go Demario Douglas because I'm pretty confident that we'll get 8 or 9 targets there. But otherwise, I'd go Mason because I can't believe they're just going to put him on the shelf and not play him.
I'm going to ask you one more question here because I'm just curious. What do you do if you have both? A lot of people, when they had Christian McCaffrey and he went out, they went out and got Jordan Mason. So if you're sitting with McCaffrey and Mason both on your team, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah, you certainly can't play Mason and McCaffrey together. I don't think I'd go that far. But Mason is one of those guys, we'd put him in a conversation with like Ray Davis and Tyler Algier, where you just have to, Blake Corum maybe, where you just have to have them stashed, right? They can't be dropped. He's way too valuable to just give away to the rest of the league. Because, of course, if anything additional happens to Christian McCaffrey, and he's, in a pretty fragile state right now, Jordan Mason, we know, is an immediate top 5 fantasy back.
All right, I'll give you my top fantasy storyline for this week, and it's can the Lions defense stop the passing attack for Houston? And hear me out, this is a volume issue. All right, Detroit right now has faced the most wide receiver targets. They've given up the most receiving yards, and they've given up the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers. Those are all just basic bare numbers. Now, it doesn't mean that defense isn't playing well. In fact, 2nd fewest points over expected. When you think about it, they're handling the workload fine. But the fact is, when you play the Lions, you chuck the ball a bunch. Now, we're going to get into this fantasy game changer later. We'll preview some of these guys. But to me, can the Lions slow down the passing attack of Tank Dell and Nico Collins, depending on health there? Can they slow that down is not only the biggest storyline in that game, but it becomes one of the biggest storylines in fantasy football over the weekend. All right, Tara, give me your top fantasy storyline for Week 10.
It is, can Joe Flacco throw on Buffalo, or is this another flop that leads to Anthony Richardson? I'm sorry, everyone. I know that you're sick and tired of hearing about Anthony Richardson versus Joe Flacco, but I'm going to make you hopefully just listen one more time here. I excused Joe Flacco's start last week, but another bad start could trigger the Colts to rethink and change their strategy here and revert back to Anthony Richardson. The entire offense looked outmatched and unprepared against Minnesota, and they will be outmatched again against Buffalo. It's a terrible matchup. Buffalo's pass defense has been excellent this season. They have 8 interceptions, 9 fumbles on the season. They've allowed the 9th fewest points to opposing teams. The Colts have been very adamant that Joe Flacco gives them the best chance to win here, but it's also clear that they're not fully moving on from Anthony Richardson. I think another poor performance here from Flacco and a big loss to the Bills could kind of trigger the Colts to snap back into reality and maybe revert course here.
We never get a poor performance from Matt Harmon. Matt, give me your top fantasy storyline this weekend.
I don't know about that one, but for me, it is a surging DeAndre Hopkins against the Denver Broncos secondary. So unlike Hopkins' first game with the Kansas City Chiefs last week against Tampa Bay, we saw him play a mix of X receiver and slot receiver, moving around to different alignments. That first game against the Raiders, he was a limited participant anyways, but he mostly, like I said, played outside X receiver. Against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, didn't run very many deep routes, and instead was a consistent target over the middle of the field against zone coverage, which perfect matchup for a player of that type of usage. And I think his skill set, this zone heavy Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense that's very prone to making coverage mistakes. Denver, on the other hand, kind of a totally different beast. Number one, super disciplined as a coverage team, and they're on the other end of the spectrum in terms of playing man coverage. So week 9, obvious layup line for DeAndre Hopkins in this new role with Kansas City. I think week 10's results actually going to be a little bit more instructive of who he is as a player and who he's going to be in this offense for the rest of the season.
All right, guys, let's get to last minute pickups. These are players that are still available out there. And I'm going to be honest, a lot of y'all are running around like Kermit the Frog with your arms flailing in the air, wondering what you're supposed to do to fill your roster. This segment has given you some home runs week in and week out. So we'll take a look at some last minute pickups out there. Tara, give us a name that's on your radar.
It was an ugly waiver wire week, but last minute you can pick up Noah Brown. Obviously, Terry McLaurin has been the dominant force in the Commanders' offense for the majority of the season here. There hasn't been a clear wide receiver one, but now it seems like Noah Brown has taken over that role. Earlier in the season, the usage for him was underwhelming, but he's really solidified a place within this offense, and Jaden Daniels is thriving. The wide receiver 2 spot in Washington has real fantasy value. And aside from one poor game against Carolina, where understandably Jaden Daniels was injured, Brown has scored between 8 and 15 fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games, Hail Mary included. Those were difficult matchups as well. So this week, facing a Pittsburgh defense that can be attacked through the air, if you are desperate at wide receiver and need someone with a solid floor and guaranteed targets, Noah Brown can be your guy.
Love that. By the way, the Giants back in the red zone. Took them a minute to wake up over in Germany, but now fourth quarter barrage of points. So we'll see what happens there. All right, Matt Harmon, give me a last minute pickup that you've got your eye on.
Yeah, I really like this one because if you've got one of these late game players like a Nico Collins or Tyreek Hill, this guy specifically might be able to help you out. The return of both Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, who obviously did not play in the second half last week, has not just brought those two back to the radar. Let's also talk about veteran wide receiver for the Rams, Demarcus Robinson, who's just 12% rostered as of this morning. And he's, you don't have to squint too hard. He's actually gone off in each of the last 2 weeks from a box score perspective. Robinson leads the team with a 28.4% air yard share. He scored 4 touchdowns on 12 targets. He leads the wideouts in these last 2 weeks in terms of EPA per target because his looks are extremely valuable. Robinson is that vertical X receiver for this team. And when you have credible threats, credible threats as kind of the movement players, the pre-snap motion guys, the Puka Nacua is moving all around the formation. Cooper Kupp in the slot. Robinson's going to get those more efficient single coverage looks against man on the outside. So yeah, of course, like the whole unit is on the up and up in LA with the return of these 2 veteran wideouts, but Robinson can be in the mix as that higher ceiling, obviously volatile flex play because you're mostly counting on touchdowns and big plays. But yeah, if you've got Nico Collins, you've got Tyreek Hill, and you want to wait on those guys, I would throw Robinson on your bench and just drop him into one of those wide receiver spots if you can.
Chris Williams in the chat asks, N. Brown or D. Robinson? What do you think?
I think I would go with Demarcus Robinson. Just attaching myself to a probably higher scoring game. And again, it's more of just the ceiling has been expressed for Demarcus Robinson more so than Noah Brown.
By the way, the reason I can't have nice things, I try and praise the Giants for waking up. No sooner did I give them credit for getting in the red zone than Daniel Jones decided, you get a football and you get a football, threw an interception. It's the Panthers' ball. So sorry for all the fantasy players out there. Andy Behrens, give me your last minute pickup that you've got in your lineup.
Yeah, Ricky Pearsall has an incredible opportunity ahead of him with Brandon Ayuk out for the season. Both Deebo Samuel and Juwan Jennings still battling injury. Pearsall available in about 65% of Yahoo leagues right now. Let's remember that he gave us 77 scrimmage yards on 5 touches before the Niners bye, while catching all of his targets. He also played 40 snaps in that game, so playing time wasn't really an issue. We always need to be cognizant of the possibility that a rookie receiver can have a more significant role coming out of a bye week too. Also, Pearsall was drafted as a potential Ayuk replacement, you might recall, and that is now exactly what this team needs. Matchups don't get a whole lot friendlier than Tampa Bay. That's a defense that ranks 30th against the pass on the season, and that's given up 18 passing touchdowns already. If we get another 5 or 6 opportunities funneled to Pearsall, that's all I'm asking for. He is definitely going to make some fantasy noise.
Andy, Tara, you guys get to grab a little water, take a little break. Matt, Harmon, come with me. It is time to make your pick, where you guys have submitted a bunch of questions. We will get them answered. The first question comes in from Graziano, and this is a long one. This is a doozy, Harmon. All right, so Graziano comes in and says, Ask FFL. Love the show. Y'all are pretty awesome. Keep up the good work. I don't know why we're just pretty awesome, but fine. Full PPR. Allen versus Colts or Purdy versus Bucks, Rachaad White or Javonte Williams. Let's start there. Allen, Purdy, Rachaad White, or Javonte Williams, and then we'll go from there. That's the first portion of it. What do you got?
I mean, definitely Josh Allen. Obviously, I think I'm assuming this is super flex. This was a very long question, but yeah, I mean, I think definitely we're going with Josh Allen here. Over Brock Purdy, if that's the question, because look, Josh Allen just has the higher ceiling. I know he's got injury issues in that wide receiver room, but they do have some depth there. Khalil Shakir is an absolute baller who I think can get a bigger role here. So definitely give me Josh Allen of all of these options here.
Okay, and then if you had to go Rachaad White or Javonte Williams, if we're choosing between those two, do you have a pick on that? I can't tell how we worded this.
Gross. Yeah, I would go with Rachaad White, though, especially because full PPR, you're going to get some of that. I mean, look, credit to Liam Cohen. They lose their top 2 wide receivers. He completely revamps the offense to strictly be, hey, we're funneling through K-Dot and we're funneling through the running backs in the passing game. So I think Rachaad White should get some consistent usage there.
There's a second half to his question, or really a third portion of this question. Lastly, pick one for flex. Debo Downs Mooney. Debo Downs Mooney, what say you, Harmon?
Yeah, as much as I like Josh Downs and Darnell Mooney, Debo Samuel, who always smashes zone coverage, going against that secondary that I mentioned is the most zone-heavy defense in the league and also is prone to coverage busts. Yeah, I would go with Debo in this matchup.
All right, the next question comes in from Joshua D'Alessandro, which just sounds like a cool name. Joshua D'Alessandro says, 2 tough calls here, both full PPR. Dowdham, Taysom Hill, or Algier at flex, then Sutton or Jonnu Smith at flex. Thank you as always for your help. Harmon, thank you for your help. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to go Courtland Sutton over Jonnu Smith there. Just look, you're kind of playing it pretty thin with Jonnu Smith in that role. And as much as Courtland Sutton, we know there's some volatility there. The targets have been there the last 2 weeks. He's got a 30% target share in that offense. It's a tougher matchup, but he's still the guy I would go with there. And then in terms of the first question, look, I know it's going to be a slog for that Cowboys offense without Dak Prescott for the rest of the season. They're trying to get you excited about, Taysom Hill type things with Trey Lance. That doesn't get me excited. Rico Dowdle's role, though, does get me excited here. So he's a guy who's getting basically all the backfield touches here. That is the pick I would go with over the actual Taysom Hill and Tyler Algier.
That hair gets me excited. Okay, Casey Anderson with the next question. Half PPR, Pollard, White, Johnston, or Pitts. What do you think, Harmon?
Yeah, I don't know if maybe I'm missing something here, but this is one of these things doesn't look like the other. And that's Tony Pollard, who, look, I know Tajay Spears is coming back. He's dealt with some injuries lately. That Chargers defense is no joke. But I honestly just think from a touches perspective, from an individual play perspective, he's been better than basically all of these guys on the list here. So I think you're getting a little too cute, going a little too thin if you take one of those 3 options over a guy like Tony Pollard, who's pretty much had running back 1 usage for most of this year.
A little too cute, often the way that Andy Behrens is described. We'll let Andy and Tara take over with some Stockwatch now.
Oh, yeah, you often hear that about me. Yeah, we have fantasy trade deadlines approaching very soon. The Yahoo default trade deadline is next weekend, in fact. So it's a great time for a little Stockwatch involving players you might be tempted to either deal away or add to the roster. Tara, give us a player whose stock is trending down.
I hate to start us off negative here, but it is Javonte Williams. We talk about him a lot, but that stock is plummeting right now, unfortunately. Just as fantasy managers were starting to feel a little bit more comfortable with Williams and his volume, things are definitely trending in the wrong direction for him. Way back in week 7, Williams had that breakout game with 2 touchdowns, his first 2 of the season, really. But it seems like that was just a big outlier performance there. And over the past 2 games, he's failed to even reach 50 yards on the ground in either outing. Hasn't scored a touchdown, hasn't hit double-digit fantasy points in half PPR. It's just a whole bunch of hasn'ts here, unfortunately. Now we're hearing that the Broncos plan to increase Audric Estime's role here. And while I am not suggesting that Estime will have a lead back role by any means here, any production that anyone takes from Williams is not good. He's a guy that needs volume to be viable in fantasy. This is a major concern for me, Andy.
Yeah, I'll give you a player whose stock is down for reasons that are completely not under his control, and that is CeeDee Lamb. Lamb is going to be stuck with Cooper Rush at quarterback for the foreseeable future. Maybe a handful of snaps for Trey Lance, we'll see. But that's just an obvious downgrade over Dak Prescott. I don't want people thinking it's a disaster scenario exactly, because we've seen this pairing in previous seasons, and it's been okay. In 7 full games together, Lamb has actually averaged 10 targets, 77 receiving yards per game with Rush. So you can consider him to be 90% or so of his usual self. Of course, he's also dealing with a shoulder injury. Plus, we have to think about how hard this team will actually push him when the losses begin to pile up. So Lamb stock clearly down to some extent, and he was otherwise a top 5 locked-in fantasy receiver with Dak. Now he's just sort of clinging to the top 12. So I think if you can package him in a deal, you can still get a little brand name value there. I think that's the way to go. Tara, why don't we pivot to the feel good section of this segment and talk about players whose stock is up a little bit?
Yeah, feel good with Courtland Sutton. I mean, Matt talked about it a little bit earlier, and that starts it. Things were obviously a little bit shaky for Sutton earlier in the season because Sean Payton was doing Sean Payton things. But Sutton is now on a hot streak with double-digit targets in each of the past 2 weeks. Target share has been excellent. A total of 15 receptions, over 200 yards here. The Broncos have really refined their offense. Finally, they're having a vision here with their receiving core where they stop trying to play games here with all of these random receivers, and they're really focusing in on Courtland Sutton. Again, Matt and I talked about this on the pod earlier this week. This matchup with Kansas City, it is daunting. But the best way to attack them is through the air. And this game should be a little bit more competitive than we might think that we've seen Bo Nix in previous weeks. More of a neutral game script here. Despite the difficult matchup, I do see Courtland Sutton continuing to be the featured player within this offense. So continuing strong, his stock up, it's going up, even though we've got this kind of difficult matchup here.
Yeah, I think it's a good call on game flow, actually, because every game that Kansas City plays is a close game that they eventually win. I'll give you a receiver that I'm looking to add wherever I can. It's George Pickens. Pittsburgh is through their bye week right now, which is nice. Plus, they managed to enhance the receiving core via trade without really affecting Pickens in any meaningful way. Pickens is extremely well paired with Russell Wilson, and those two have combined for 185 yards over their last 2 games. Also, the second half schedule is just a gift for this team's passing game. Every division game is still ahead of them. That means it's almost nothing but Baltimore, Cleveland, Cincinnati the rest of the way, and all 3 of those defenses are vulnerable to the pass. Baltimore and Cleveland are actually among the worst in the league in terms of pass defense. So stock, in my opinion, is way up for both Russell Wilson and George Pickens. Tara, I'm gonna surprise you here. A little question from the YouTube chat because they name checked you in this one. Who is this? This is Raziel820 asking, best fantasy show on the net. Thank you very much. Tara's advice won me my match last week. Hoping for more magic this week. Please pick 2. You get DJ Moore, George Pickens, or Darnell Mooney. These are all good options.
Oh man, they are fantastic options. I do kind of lean towards George Pickens on this one. DJ Moore is, in theory, should be the wide receiver one, but we've seen Rome Odunze pushing through there, so that one kind of concerns me. So I'm going with George Pickens on this one.
Okay, it's Pickens, and they need 2. Who's your second? Are you
and
sitting,
2? Yeah,
sitting DJ Moore in this one?
Yeah, Darnell Mooney has been on a roll. I know it feels weird to go with the wide receiver 2 there, but Drake London is active, dealing with that injury. I still think that we see strong volume here in this matchup. So Darnell Mooney is another one that just has such high upside and a decently solid floor there. So I lean towards Mooney over DJ Moore, crazy as it is.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I agree with you there. All right, let's bring back Fitz and Matt for a little game changer action.
We missed you guys. Let's bring the whole group back together and turn our attention to fantasy game changers for this week, powered by Ram Trucks, where we identify some of the most impactful players in one of the top fantasy matchups on the schedule. This week's matchup, we talked about it a little bit earlier. We've got the Lions taking on the Texans, and this is a big matchup, obviously, for 2 great teams, also big for everybody in fantasy football at NRG Stadium. The Lions favored by 3.5, the over-under on this, 49. So, Andy Behrens, when I say fantasy game changer, you say...
Yeah, listen, if Houston has any shot whatsoever to keep pace with Detroit, they're going to need another big week from Tank Dell. In recent weeks, as he gets further removed from last year's injury, he's looked a little bit more like his old self, I think. He is dealing with a back injury this week. Sounds like he's going to be able to go. Dell has either 100 yards or a touchdown in 3 of his last 4 games. So he's been at least moderately helpful lately. Coming off his biggest receiving output of the season was 6 catches, 126 yards last week against the Jets. This week, a much friendlier matchup with a defense that's actually allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Very good chance CJ Stroud will need to put the ball in the air 40 plus times on Sunday night. And if that happens, there's almost no way that Tank Dell isn't going to produce. Last week was really the first time all season we saw a game from Dell that looked exactly like last year, right? Downfield opportunities, high ADOT, 7+ yards after the catch. I think the return of Nico Collins can actually only help Dell too, because it obviously reshapes the field, gives Detroit's defense a huge problem to solve.
We got a question in the chat on that. I'll hold you to. I won't try and say his name because I can't pronounce it, but it says full PPR, flex Dell or Mooney. What do you think?
Oh man, I hate to talk up Tank Dell and then pick the other guy, but I think I might pick the other guy here and go Mooney. The volume has just been so locked in, and the matchup this week with the Saints is just a gift.
All right, Tara, give me your fantasy game changer.
Andy is talking about that Texans passing game. I want to talk about the run game, specifically Joe Mixon. He is absolutely thriving, and that might even be an understatement here. Excluding the games where Mixon got hurt and played less than the single game where Mixon got hurt and played less than 50% of snaps, he has had over 100 yards in every game this season and scored at least 1 touchdown. Last week's performance was surprisingly low in fantasy points due to his receiving work, but that was an outlier, still great on the ground. And the matchup against Detroit's run defense isn't actually as daunting as you would think. Early this season, obviously, Detroit's run defense was a complete no-go, but recently they've been giving up strong volume to backs like Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, Aaron Jones, and talent just wins out against Detroit's run defense. Mixon has more than enough talent to keep on rolling here, so Joe Mixon is my game changer.
All right, Matt Harmon, it feels like we've had a lot on one side. Give me your game changer. Let's see if we can get a little balance on this.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of options to go with on the Detroit Lions, but let's talk about Amon-Ra St. Brown as the game changer for Detroit here. And I want to kind of take a big picture look at this too, because there's been some sort of worries about St. Brown and the fact that he's on pace for the lowest yards per game figure since his rookie season. But if you look at the volume, it's pretty identical target share. It's pretty identical air yard share. It's pretty identical air yards per target from this year to last year. So there's really no change in the usage. So what gives here? Really, it's just that the Lions are too good right now. When the Lions have to open up, we know that this ecosystem is still a pristine passing environment. So the question here is, are they going to have to do that against the Houston Texans? Their offense is kind of trending down. Maybe if they get Nico Collins, they'll bring it back up. So kind of we'll see on that. But regardless, I do think this is a really good matchup for St. Brown. The Texans play such tight perimeter man coverage. They bring heat off the edge with their 2-star pass rushers. Jared Goff's going to need to get the ball out quick. He's going to want to pick on the interior of that defense. All of that sounds like Amon-Ra St. Brown's calling card to me. And don't forget that he probably could see even more space underneath with the return of field stretcher Jamison Williams back off a 2-game suspension. So I like St. Brown to probably get it going here in this matchup against the Texans.
All right, let's bring everybody together and huddle up because it is time for the hurry up offense. We put 25 seconds on the clock and we get through as many questions as we possibly can. The first one comes from Lisa that says, London, Scary Terry, or CD? Ask FFL. Andy Behrens?
Oh man, all good options. You have a couple of strong options here that allow me to put CeeDee Lamb on the bench, which I think I would do with Cooper Rush at quarterback. I'm gonna go Terry McLaurin. Every ball that Jaden Daniels throws to Terry McLaurin this season is a perfect pass. It's been great.
Well, with time to spare. Oh my God, Eddie Behrens is on a roll. I didn't expect that. The next one comes in from Jeff. Jeff says, ask FFL, Puka or AJ Brown full PPR? Matt Harmon?
Yeah, full PPR. Neither guy probably fully healthy at this point, but when AJ Brown has been out there, he has just been getting the kinds of targets we want for a fantasy wide receiver. He's been getting them deep. He's been getting them in the end zone. I'm going to go AJ Brown here, who I think right now has a pretty strong case when he's healthy to be the wide receiver 1 overall rest of the season.
All right, the next question comes from STG84. Thoughts on Kamara for the rest of the season? Would you target him in a trade considering how beat up that offense is? Ask FFL. Tara, what do you think?
I would, yeah. I know that perception in terms of the offense and even sometimes Kamara in general is kind of down here. But looking at that Saints offense, especially with Olave going on IR, the primary pass catcher is going to be Alvin Kamara. The targets are going to be insane. We may not be getting much on the ground, but the volume will be there, especially in PPR.
Tara asks, Thomas Jr., Taysom Hill, or Hawkinson, Kincaid starting? Ask FFL. What do you think, Andy?
First of all, I think that's a great move to have Kincaid starting in this one, especially with no Amari Cooper, no Keon Coleman. It's pretty much going to be Kincaid and Khalil Shakir. My other start here would probably be Taysom Hill. That's kind of wild to say, but Brian Thomas is dealing both with injury and with Mac Jones this week. So I think I want to go Taysom and just count on those 10 touches.
Harmon, let's get a quarterback question answered. These are rare. Man versus life says Kyler or Herbert. What do you think?
Oh, man versus life. I feel that. This is a tough one. Both guys going against pretty difficult defenses. The Titans defense has been understated, really good. We'll talk about them a little bit later on in the show. But Kyler, I do think is the right answer here. I realize it's been frustrating. It's been a little up and down with Kyler Murray. When they can lean on a team, they will do it with their run game. But I'm not sure this is that type of game. So I think Kyler is probably a little bit ahead of Herbert for me this week.
We're just getting started on getting your questions answered. But in the meantime, Football 301, one of my favorite podcasts we have here at Yahoo Sports, does a great job of deep diving information you need about the game. This week, the guys got onto a fantasy conversation that you need to check a little of it out. Here it is.
I'll give a bit of fantasy advice. I would just throw anyone with an Eagles helmet out there into my starting lineup. Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Saquon Barkley, any backup tight end, any backup running back, because how the hell are they going to stop this offense? Like, personnel-wise, I don't think they obviously don't have the horses for it. They're not going to score a lot of points on offense. I think this is just another bad game. Like, this is one of those games where I was like, hey, Dak plays. That might be interesting, but he's not, so it's not interesting.
It's not. The Eagles defense is probably the most interesting part about all this. Eagles offense is kind of, it's the stars. It's what you expect. So like you said, but it's their defense is interesting. I like a lot of the young players. So check out some Eagles young players when you're watching this game. Yeah. Zach Bond, it's been a great signing for them, but just all the Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, all these guys, they're really stepping up. So that would be the thing I'd focus on when I'm watching this game, because it's not the Cowboys offense. I'll tell you that.
Could we be looking at overtime right now? The Panthers are up 17-14 over the Giants. You see some of the key numbers there. Chuba Hubbard, big day. Tyrone Tracy, over 100 yards. But the Giants with the ball and driving. There's 17 seconds left. They've stopped the clock at Carolina 27. So from here, we'd be talking about a 44-yard field goal. Munich didn't know that they needed overtime on this game. What's better than getting Giants versus the Panthers is getting extra Giants versus Panthers. I don't know. Like, if this is how we're growing the game internationally, I think free bad football just isn't the way to go. We'll keep you updated on that game, obviously, because, well, we have to. But there's an actual game worth talking about. That's the Dolphins-Rams Monday night. A lot of excitement over this game. The Rams favored by 1.5. They're at home in this one. Going to be beautiful, obviously, in Inglewood, California. Over-under on that is 49.5. So when you start thinking about this game, Matt, what stands out to you as one of the biggest factors in it?
Yeah, I think this is a big game for Cooper Kupp in this one for a couple of different reasons. One, watching the first half of the game last week against the Seahawks, because this was the only half of the game he participated in, I'm not sure Puka Nacua looked 100% himself. Looked fantastic on limited usage against the Vikings the week prior. Then against the Seahawks, I think, again, he re-aggravated that injury. He was able to play and just, again, didn't quite look like himself. And we know that when Puka's not out there, or when he's out there and he's limited like that, Cooper Kupp targets are going to go through the roof. 14 targets last week in an effective outing for the Rams offense against the Seattle Seahawks defense. I like him to be the lead receiver once again in this matchup because the Dolphins play a lot of zone coverage over the middle of the field. We saw Marvin Harrison Jr. get them on some of those crossing routes a few weeks ago. Those are kind of the Cooper Kupp specialty routes in the intermediate area. I like him to hit a lot of those plays here in this matchup.
Tara, what stands out to you?
I think we finally got the perfect matchup for Tua Tagovailoa. Heading into the season, Tua was one of my fades, unfortunately, because he struggles in tougher matchups and he needs high volume and favorable games to thrive because he doesn't have that rushing upside. So I say that to say, if I'm telling you to believe in Tua this week, everyone should, because since his return, he has finished as QB 22 and QB 19. The fantasy output has not been impressive, but he has looked good on the field. He's been efficient. He's been sliding appropriately. And last week we saw in particular where he completed 25 of 28 passes. He hasn't thrown an interception. Things look good. It's just that Tua needs that perfect opportunity in a high volume matchup in order to be a thriving quarterback from a fantasy perspective. This week, the Rams, perfectly favorable matchup for him. They've got a young defense that is pulling things together, but still very vulnerable through the air here. So I love this opportunity, this matchup for Tua to finally have that breakout top 10 kind of outing that we're hoping to see from him at some point.
Andy Behrens, what stands out to you?
Yeah, Devon Achane, he's been the clear winner, maybe the only obvious winner following Tua's return to Miami. Over the past 2 weeks, Achane has given us 160 rushing yards, 108 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. He's kind of killing Jaylen Waddle in this offense, but if you have Achane on a roster, you don't really care about other people's problems. Every season, some undersized running back around the league gets hyped as a player who is going to see a high volume of snaps and routes from the slot, but it almost never actually happens. But Achane has actually been the exception to that. He's up to 45 slot snaps on the season. That's a huge total for a running back. And he's seen 16 total targets over the past 2 weeks. Another nice aspect of that slot usage is that it allows multiple running backs to be on the field, stressing a defense simultaneously. The bottom line here is that when Achane is healthy and Tua is healthy, you really need to think of Achane as a top 5 fantasy back. That's what he's been. His receiving usage makes him both matchup proof and I think impervious to game flow as well. So you can fire him up with confidence.
And it's funny because that leads me to my top storyline on this, which is that to me, Jaylen Waddle is sort of the X factor, right? Like he's taking on a Rams defense that's allowed 11th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. This should be a favorable matchup for an offense that I believe can be dynamic repeatedly. But this is sort of that moment where will Waddle be able to find his standing in this offense with Achane getting as much as he's getting? As somebody that has Achane in my leagues, I love the fact that it's happening. But Waddle really stands out to the X factor to me because if he can start to get his target share and his catches through this Dolphins offense again becomes what we knew this Dolphins offense could be at the beginning of the year, which is virtually unstoppable. It just takes a little bit of time post-injury, which is sort of the message I've been preaching throughout. That patience is a virtue. Patience is a virtue in your early morning football game as we now are. It looks like we are headed to overtime. The Giants get the field goal. They have tied it. We are at 17-17 with 5 seconds left to go in regulation. So congratulations, Germany. You get more. This question for you. Harlan has come in on the chat and said, I'll throw this to Matt. Good morning. I just mentioned Waddle, so we'll see if Matt tears me apart on it. Half PPR, McConkey or Waddle? What do you got?
Oh, man. I mean, this is tough because we don't know if Tyreek Hill's going to play. I feel like if Tyreek Hill is not out there, then Jaylen Waddle is definitely the answer. But, you know, if Hill does play, which, again, I realize I'm not helping you because I'm saying a lot of ifs here, then I don't know that you can go with Jaylen Waddle at this point just because that usage has not been there. Could it change at some point? Absolutely. We know he's a good player. I don't really think there's any issues with him when I watch him play in isolation. It's just the problem is right now there's not enough volume in the passing game to satisfy both Hill, Devon Achane, and then get the ball to Waddle. So to me, because I think you are relying on something that you don't know at this point, which is the Tyreek Hill absence, I would probably play it safe and go with Ladd McConkey, who is getting significantly better usage in his offense than what Jaylen Waddle is getting in his.
Let's get to prime time picks. You know the deal. This is where we pick flex players from 3 different games. We go snake draft, and we keep the standings going as we go. And what do you know? Andy Behrens, look at for the second straight week, we get a very close game, and it comes down to the wire. Andy Behrens, would you like to make an acceptance speech? You won last week, which puts you now in 3rd place. You won by, what, 0.4, less than half of a point? It's a big moment for you, brother.
It was a big moment for me. Big turning point in my primetime pick season. I have all the momentum in this contest now, feeling really good, feeling confident.
Well, that's also, I will remind everybody the total points actually kind of bear out too. So as we stand right now, the primetime games, Jets versus Cardinals, And then we got Detroit, Houston, and we've also put Miami and the Rams on here. So those are our 3 games to choose from: Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, and then a late game. So Matt, Harmon, I feel like for what feels like for the 18th time this season, there's only been 10 weeks. You are picking first, good sir. Who would you like with the first pick in the draft?
just shut up, Fitz. I just want to say for the record, what a dishonorable win by Andy Behrens. You know, Kareem Hunt on an overtime touchdown. Absolutely dishonorable stuff. But moving forward, we don't look backwards. We look forwards on this program. I'm going to take Jahmyr Gibbs here in the first round. Fantastic player. He's leading the league in rushing success rate right now. He's just been a total baller. And I also need him to save me in a few actual fantasy leagues. So why not be double invested in this situation?
Okay, Andy Behrens, you are up next. You can respond to your claims of fraudulence too, if you would like.
Hey, a win's a win. Win under any circumstances is a win. I needed it desperately, so I'm not gonna complain. I'm gonna take whatever comes my way. Any points that come my way, any win that comes my way in any week. This week, I'm going to go with Devon Achane. I just hyped him. It's a very friendly matchup against the Rams. He's a great bet for 120 plus yards and a touchdown in any given week. So great pick by me again, I think. Let's go.
I do love that pick for you. I'm going to do what Tera did last week, and I'm going to consult with Harmon's attorneys because my guy might not be available. But I'm rolling the dice on Tyreek Hill. If the attorneys that tell me if he doesn't play, I'll just take whatever scraps you guys will give me off of the Dolphins heap that's left at this point. But Tyreek Hill, and I'm just going to hope and pray that wrist is okay and that he plays. That means, Tera, you are up.
I talked about this one earlier, so I'm just putting my money where my mouth is. I'm taking Joe Mixon here. I actually think Mixon has the highest upside in half PPR of any player in this matchup, so I'm super happy with this pick. For my second pick, though, I am taking Breece Hall. Oh, please don't let me down. Breece Hall's performances have been strong overall, but the lack of touchdown continues to be an issue. But this is a good matchup, maybe a nice little uptick in receiving volume to help carry me over there. So Joe Mixon and Breece Hall.
Tera, I'm sorry to do this to you, but they're telling me I have to. Sean in the YouTube chat has asked, love the show, guys. Half PPR, Mixon or Hall? You just picked them. Who you taking?
It's Mixon for me. Again, I think this is a matchup where he's just going to have such high volume there. So we're going Mixon.
Perfect. That means I'm on the clock, and before, I'm going to take Matt Harmon's advice, basically, and I'm just going to turn around and roll with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, this makes too much sense. I'm sitting here saying I just got brilliant expertise on why he's going to be a target monster and never fails on those. So I'm taking Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I am just laughing the entire way as Harmon looks at me and gets red in the cheeks. Andy Behrens, what do you got?
I'm gonna go James Conner here. He's gone over 100 rushing yards in 2 of his last 3. Actually leads all running backs in missed tackles by a mile to this point in the season, and he gets a Jets defense that has allowed 4 consecutive huge weeks to running backs. Joe Mixon did it, Ramondre did it, Najee Harris did it, Ray Davis did it. You go back a month, they keep giving up huge performances. So I think James Conner makes it 5.
And that means, Matt Harmon, again, you get 2 straight picks now as we come around the turn. What do you got?
Yeah, thanks for that explanation. I consulted with my attorneys, by the way, and they said if Tyreek Hill does not play, you will be awarded with Durham Smythe, number 2 tight end or maybe number 3 tight end, depending on how you look at it. For the Miami
Consulting
Dolphins,
new attorneys. I'm getting new attorneys.
Sorry. No, sorry. The show's specific attorneys made that designation, so you cannot change that. Okay, for my picks here, I'm going to go with Garrett Wilson out of this Jets game because, catch of the year last week, 2 touchdowns. His usage has been on the rise. He's looked fantastic since they've gotten Devontae Adams in there. That Cardinals secondary can be beat every which way he lines up in a variety of positions. So give me Garrett Wilson. And then I'll go with Kyren Williams, who you knuckleheads, I think, have let fall way too far here. Kyren Williams touches the ball in like 99, or he gets like 99% of the snaps. He leads the team in touches. He's been one of the best running backs in fantasy this year. So I'm going to go with Kyren Williams. And because I just talked like that, I will definitely be losing again this week. Let's just go ahead and put that in the books.
And Andy, that means you're back up. What do you got for us?
Yeah, look at the guy in last place trash talking us. Okay, I'm gonna take David Montgomery here. He's got got 7 rushing touchdowns on the season. That's the same as Jahmyr Gibbs. He's the guy who put away the Packers last week. Gave us 96 total yards on 20 touches. He's looked fantastic. There's no stopping that run game right now. Quite often, both Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery go off, so I think that may happen again this week.
I'm sitting here trying to figure out how Davante Adams is still left for me. He had 11 targets last week. So, at this point, I'm just looking at the target share, and I'm thinking that it's only going to grow for Davante. So I quickly take Davante Adams. I've got all wide receivers on mine. Tara, that means you got the last pick for this one as I go Davante, and that leaves you with the Monday night game still left for you.
Yeah, by the way, you guys are killing me on this one. I wish I could participate in the trash talk, but it's been tough. I'm not trying to rub it in your face. I've just been in first place for such a long time. With this last pick, this is tough. It's Puka or Cooper Kupp. I'm going Puka on this one. I've gone back and forth on this one. I'm hoping that Puka, after Punchgate, is going to come back and just want to dominate on this one and dominate the targets. So Puka to go on this one.
By the way, nice shade suddenly thrown in there, and well done by you. We're still in overtime in Munich for everyone tracking that. We are tied at 17 as overtime is underway. We'll keep you updated on that. In the meantime, Andy, Tara, why don't you get us to a little bit of fantasy face-off?
Yeah, it's fantasy face-off time. We're gonna be talking about a few weird players in this one. A few weirder than Quentin Johnston. He's kind of actually rewritten his scouting profile, I think, a bit this season. He's becoming a much more reliable target for Justin Herbert, who's playing really well right now. Johnston was a buzzy ad this week, obviously coming off a game with 118 yards and a touchdown. Headed into a matchup with Tennessee. So let's consider him alongside some similarly ranked options. And we'll begin with Keenan Allen of my beloved Chicago Bears. He's looking a little bit fossilized lately, but not entirely fossilized. Coming off an unproductive game in which he also saw 10 targets. Who do you like this week, Johnston or Allen?
This one is, I'm with you. I love Keenan Allen on this one, not because he's a Bear, just because he's always been a PPR god. Unfortunately, I can't go with Keenan Allen on this one. I got to go with Johnston. I know the volume and the touchdowns have been a little bit fluky for Johnston on this one, but I just can't feel comfortable with Keenan Allen in any way. We talked about the potential surge here for Rome Odunze. DJ Moore is still in the mix. It just feels like Keenan Allen has taken a clear backseat as a risk, so just go ahead and give me the fluke there with Quentin Johnston. How about you?
Yeah, no, I'm kind of with you on that as well. I think it's very clear who is more likely to score a touchdown in any given week, even though a lot of what Quentin Johnston is doing are on it's kind of busted coverage situations, but they're looking his way often enough to make me feel a little bit more confident in him. So I agree with that. There's always one or two of these Bears pass catchers who just don't do a thing in any given week. Let's look at Jawan Jennings too. He's back from the hip injury. We think he's going to be good to go. Brandon Ayuk is out of the mix again for the rest of the season. So Jennings moves up in the target hierarchy. He's given us one of the best individual single game performances that we've seen this year. So who are you going with, Jennings or Johnston?
Give me Jennings here. I am a bit curious, though, I will say. I'm curious as to how Shanahan uses Jennings versus Pearsall, because I'm not 100% sold on Ricky fading into nothing with Jawan Jennings back. I think, we first round pick, they want to continue to get involved. They clearly like him. So I'm kind of interested to see how routes kind of shake out between these two. But again, that 11 receptions, 3 touchdowns is just burned into my memory at this point. It feels like sitting Jawan Jennings is just poor choice here. So I'm going with Jennings on this one. How about you, Andy?
Yeah, no, I would go Jennings as well. And I think they're both going to see the field, right? Like, I think there's a path for Pearsall to be really good in this one, maybe get himself 5 opportunities or so. I think Jennings has a slightly higher ceiling, almost never comes off the field. He's essential as a run blocker. They love him. So again, he's not coming off the field in this one, and it's a great matchup. So I'd go Jennings there. One last name here. How about Xavier Worthy? Man, we get questions about him just absolutely every week, and people throw his name into questions with players where it just doesn't feel like it belongs. He's a gadgety rookie receiver, kind of a TD or bust player, although Johnston also fits that description.
Yeah, Andy, I'm gonna need you to tell me if I'm being delusional on this theory here. So Patrick Surtain will be on DeAndre Hopkins. Travis Kelce, obviously the primary target here for Mahomes. But if tougher coverage is on DeAndre Hopkins, maybe that could open things up in terms of opportunities for Worthy. It's very risky because the floor is apparently negative points for him. Quentin Johnson has definitely dominated the majority of categories there, but I'm leaning like by a smidge on Worthy, and I feel like it's just this wild optimism of some kind of magic happening in this matchup.
It's possible. We can't rule it out. I never go with Worthy in these questions, though. I'd probably still go with Johnston. Again, it's almost coin flippy because it's one of these guys is going to score a touchdown and the other one probably isn't. I don't know that Patrick Surtain. I mean, he has shadowed a great deal this season. I don't know if it happens with DeAndre. I don't know if they move DeAndre around enough that he doesn't see Surtain in front of him on absolutely every snap. But then we've still got Kelsey to worry about. It just feels like with Worthy, they're going to try to manufacture, I don't know, 4 or 5 opportunities for him a game, and that's the end of it. So slight lean for me with Johnston. But let's bring in our friends Matt and Fitz here for a little lock it in.
We're going to lock it in, but we're also going to get you a quick update here as we do have a final. The Giants have lost. The Panthers have won. The Carolina Panthers have won 20-17. Chuba Hubbard with 153 yards and a touchdown there. Tyrone Tracy also with 103 rushing yards and a touchdown. The Carolina Panthers got me smiling right now. They just picked up their 2nd win of the season. So they pulled to 2-7. The Giants dropped to 2-7. And if you're a fan of a 2-7 team like I am, draft stock might have just gotten a little better. All right, I'm celebrating the draft already. That's how much my life sucks. All right, Harmon, lock it in. Give me somebody that's on your mind that you are ready to lock in for today.
Yeah, let's talk about a good team from the AFC West. Let's talk about the number 1 receiver for the LA Chargers. That is Ladd McConkey. Tough matchup against a Tennessee Titans defense. It's been very good all season long. But if you look at this defense, teams have actually been, if you take out, like, and this is according to Fantasy Points data, if you take out the games against, Snoop Huntley, Malik Willis, some dysfunctional passing games, teams have actually been much more likely to throw than run against the Tennessee Titans. And the Chargers have been very inclined to throw a lot lately. They've continued their pass-heavy ways in recent weeks. Since returning from their Week 5 bye, the LA Chargers rank 2nd in neutral pass rate. That is a far cry from what many feared this offense would be coming to the season. And I, for one, could not be more shocked that 2 professional coaches have decided to run their offense differently with Justin Herbert behind center as opposed to like Alex Smith and Colin Kaepernick over 10 years ago. So again, what a shock. But the Chargers are throwing the ball. Ladd McConkey is the number 1 receiver on this team. He leads the team in target share, air yard share. He's the guy that when they throw to, Herbert trusts the most. I think you should trust him in your lineups this week, even in a difficult matchup.
And to give you credit, you've been on this one for a minute. Like you pointed out, the Chargers changing their offense, their shift a few weeks ago. 1,000% correct to what you saw there. Give me another name that you are ready to lock in.
Despite our personal differences, Fitz, I appreciate you giving me a little credit. Or should I say, not personal, professional differences when it comes to the primetime picks. I appreciate the little bit of credit there. I'll give credit to the Washington offense, which talk about something I was not on. I was very wrong about how this offense would perform this year. And that greatness has trickled down to Terry McLaurin, who certainly has a tough matchup this week against a Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Great overall. This is going to be one of the games of the week. Shocking enough here, Commanders and Steelers. But while this defense is extremely good, the Steelers play single high on 68% of their snaps, according to Fantasy Points data. And that is when Washington really likes to rip it deep, which is what I was not expecting from this offense coming into the season. Terry McLaurin has the 6th most yards against single high coverage with a beefy 17.8 average depth of target, which is far and away number 1 against this defense in terms of these high-end productive receivers. Look, Jaden Daniels has picked his spots in terms of when he's going deep. This offense isn't just chucking it just to chuck it. He's very effective in noticing these coverages and going to Terry McLaurin. So again, while the matchup is tough, Pittsburgh's defense is very good overall. I do like Terry McLaurin specifically to hit a couple of big plays in this matchup.
All right, let's bring the gang back together. Huddle up. It's time, as always, for more Hurry Up Offense. 25 seconds go on the clock. You guys have given us a ton of questions. First one comes from Steven, who says, help! I got 1 spot available for Shakir, Ladd, or Mooney. Thanks for your help and love your show. Tara, we'll start with you. What do you think?
Oh, man, I love all these guys. I lean towards Shakir by a smidge on this one, just with the injuries and all. Shakir is going to have strong target volume on this one, so lean that way. By a smidge.
Smidge is a very professional measurement. I love that. All right. The next question comes in from Alicia Woodruff, who says, need to start one. Mostert, Eckler, Algier, Davis, Bigsby. Ask FFL. I'll ask Andy.
Yeah, some weeks Bigsby would be the right answer here, but he needs a very particular kind of game flow that I don't think he's going to get in this one against Minnesota. So I'm actually going to go Austin Eckler. No Brian Robinson this week. It's not an ideal matchup against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's been really good against both the run and pass, but I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for Eckler.
I really want you to say very particular set of skills at some point now with a little bit of an accent for all of us. Philly Al comes in next. In standard scoring, Javonte or Ricky Pearsall, what do you think, Matt?
Man, I just have not gotten the Javonte Williams weeks right. So let me be transparent when I say that I actually think I'm going to go with Ricky Pearsall on this one. A very beatable defense, as Andy talked about earlier, against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So let's go with that direction.
Max T comes up next and says, who to start, CJ Stroud or Matthew Stafford? Ask FFL. What do you think, Tara?
Yeah, it's Matt Stafford for me. CJ Stroud, yeah, getting potentially Nico Collins back here would definitely be a big boom here, but I do expect this to be a game where they dominate on the ground. Matt Stafford, with all of his weapons, recently it's been fire, so he's been fantastic. I leaned that direction on Matt Stafford with Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, Kyron Williams, the whole game back together in what should be a high-volume matchup here.
All right, we got a question coming in from YouTube. Got to be a family member of mine. Crazy White Guy 01 says, ask FFL, please help. Standard half PPR, Rodgers or Mayfield, and McBride or Hawkinson. So Andy Behrens, Rodgers or Mayfield, and McBride or Hawkinson.
Yeah, first of all, you got to go Trey McBride. Regardless of matchup, he's just a central piece in that offense. I would definitely go him over Hawkinson right now. I think I'm also going to go Aaron Rodgers. Difficult matchup for Baker Mayfield here, and the Niners are coming off bye.
All right, another one from the YouTube chat comes from Chris Pittman. Ask FFL, tough one. Bigsby, Ray Davis, or Jaylen Warren. Does it matter though? My opponent had Jamar Chase. LOL. Matt, what do you think?
No, probably doesn't matter. I don't think any of these three guys are saving you this week. I guess I'm going to go with Jaylen Warren here. If this is full PPR or not, I was too shook by the Jamar Chase thing that I don't know if I heard you say that, Fitz. But yeah, I think I would go with Jaylen Warren.
All right, we'll go back to some of the Twitter X questions. This one came from Tabonio is the next one. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Tabonio says, Superflex League, start Cooper Rush or Cortland Sutton. What do you think, Tara?
Oh, even in Superflex, I think I would go ahead and still start Cooper Rush. It could be a disaster here, but we do have CeeDee Lamb. So the complement of weapons are there, and the opportunity is there for him. I would lean that direction. I know it feels tempting to go Sutton on there, but I would still go with Rush.
All right, the next question comes from Pedro Ramos, who says, PPR League, should I start Jawan Jennings over D-Hop over concerns that maybe Patrick Surtain will be covering D-Hop all game? Thanks. Andy Behrens?
I get the concern. It's a valid concern, but at some point you just have to start the great player on the great offense, and I think I would go with Hopkins here. I think they're going to move him around enough that he's going to see some opportunities without, a shutdown corner in front of him. So I'd go Hopkins.
Maybe the single best name of the day, the mediocre Gatsby. Ask FFL. Need two. DJ Moore, Shakir, Montgomery, McLaurin. We'll ask the mediocre Harmon. I kid, Harmon. You know we love him.
Wow.
I mean, I don't even feel like I should respond to that. But for the sake of the person here, I'm gonna go with Montgomery and Terry McLaurin. Shakir is very tempting. DJ Moore is not very tempting, but Shakir is tempting. But I'll go with Montgomery and McLaurin.
You're always great in my mind. All right, back to the YouTube comes from Dakota Cole. What do you think about this? Half PPR league. Who to put in the flex? Devonta Smith or George Pickens? I'm starting Marvin Harrison Jr. and Drake London. Tara, what do you think?
I would still go with Devonta Smith on that one. I do like him in this matchup. We heard earlier that you should start anyone and everyone for the Eagles in this matchup here. Even with A.J. Brown, I think Devonta Smith still has upside there.
The next YouTube question comes, this is wide receiver heavy, so I'm going to throw it to Harmon. It says, help, and it's from Norland. Lost Olave and now have Tyreek a game time decision. I only have Quentin Johnson, Pearsall, and Mike Williams as backups. Have Aaron Jones and Eckler as running back with Dowdle and flex. Should I take London?
I like how you were confused about what the question was, because I was too. I would say that if you need one of those wide receivers, I think it's probably Quentin Johnson here.
Yeah, I was a little. You know what, Norland? We did our best with that. That's a lot. Norland, let's talk about brevity in the YouTube. All right, you got it. I can't read these things in 25 seconds and still give Harmon any time. All right, we'll give the next one comes from Cy Gray, who says, in a 2-quarterback league, who should I start between Tua, Kyler, and Drake May? Andy Behrens, what do you think?
I'm definitely starting Kyler here. Elite dual threat quarterback. He's looked really good as a rusher this season. I know you're a little disappointed in last week's performance, but he just simply didn't have to do much. So I'm going Kyler there. And then I think I'm also going to go Drake May against the Bears. That's a banged up defense, missing some pieces this week. He's coming off a game with 95 rushing yards. I want that.
All right, that's it for us. Obviously, we can come back on Thursday. We'll be here 7:30 to 8 p.m. every single Thursday. We're here before the Thursday night matchup to get you caught up on everything you need to know for that. And also, we're here every single Sunday from noon to 1 p.m. with all of your questions get an answer. For everybody that participates in the chat, we really appreciate. Hope we can get as many of your questions in every single week as possible. It takes an entire village to make the show happy. We're incredibly thankful. We're incredibly thankful for them and all of their hard work. In the meantime, for Andy Behrens, for the great Matt Harmon, for Tera Roberts, I'm Jason Fitz. Thank you so much for watching Fantasy Football Live, presented by Ram Trucks. Love you, man.